Okay, this year is Le'ili Nishmas Harav Yitzchak ben Harav Eliezer Tzvi Ze'ev Le'ili Nishmasai, and it should be an Aliyas Hanashama for him, and so close to so many beautiful halacha shiurim. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all those that are behind all the halacha shiurim project, Kana Power Hour, and many people have commenting how they've learned so much in halacha, and it's a credit for those that are behind the scenes arranging them. Hashem should bless them with everything they need. We had a shir the other day when we went through the halachas of the 3 weeks, and we started discussing the halachas of the 9 days. I'm not going to repeat what was in the first year, but I will move in. We're already in the middle of the halachas of the 9 days. Most of it we haven't covered, but just for brevity, I'm just going to start from where we're up to right now, with the hope that standing right now, before the 9 days begin, we have another few hours till the 9 days begin. None of these halachas will be relevant. But we will talk about how these halachas were kept in Gullus and the beauty of transforming these halachas into a positive sign in time of Gula. So one of the halachas associated with the 9 days is that it is forbidden to wash clothing. Kibbutz begadim, washing clothing. Washing clothing is forbidden. I'm just making sure I'm seen over here. Washing clothing is forbidden in the 9 days, even through a goy. Even something that you don't want to wear now, you want to wear after Tisha B'Av, also cannot be done in the 9 days. Even if you're traveling right after Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to wash clothing. Now, if somebody's on vacation and it comes the week of Tisha B'Av, the week of Tisha B'Av is actually more severe than the 9 days. This year, the week of Tisha B'Av is only Tisha B'Av. But if a person is on vacation, he has to leave in the week of Tisha B'Av, and now he's leaving the apartment where he's been staying, and he has to wash all the laundry. It's totally inappropriate to leave a person's linen there unwashed. But at the same time, it's 9 days. You're leaving in the middle of the 9 days. So you're allowed to wash their clothes. In this case, it's a special heter you can wash through a guy. Normally, you can't wash even through a guy, even if you need it for after Tisha B'Av. And even if you're traveling, you're not allowed to give clothing to the cleaners, although it's not regular washing. They use other chemicals. That's also considered washing. This doesn't only apply to clothing. The issur is issur to wash, whether something you're going to wear, whether something you're going to put on your tablecloth, towels, any of those things is a problem. Even things that are not for bodily needs, dish towels, briefcases. So long it's something which arguably is arguably called a beged, but not if it's a keli. So, for example, washing the floor, there's no issur min hadin to wash the floor. There are people that had a minyan, they wouldn't wash their tables and their benches, and perhaps they compared it to washing, perhaps they compared it to painting. The halacha is you're allowed to wash dishes, right? So you're allowed to wash your floor. There's no halacha that you're not allowed to wash the floor. So anything which is some sort of a beged of a material is a problem to wash. You're not allowed to wash even if you're washing for a non-Jew. That applies only in the week of Tisha B'Av, which, like we said, this year is only on Tisha B'Av itself, is the week of Tisha B'Av, because Tisha B'Av is on a Sunday. To give to a laundromat to wash, so as we mentioned, you're not allowed to do that, even if you tell it to wash after Tisha B'Av, to a goyish laundromat. If you give it to them before the Shchodesh Av, and they will wash it after the Shchodesh, that's fine. But from the Shchodesh, you can't go give it to them. If a person is stuck without a shirt for Shabbos, and then the heter is he's allowed to go give a guy to wash his shirt for Shabbos. Best not to do it to have the guy do it in Jewish home because of Maras Ein. But there is a heter because it's the covered Shabbos. I had an interesting question I've been asked. Somebody came home from a long trip and he wants to bring his wife his dirty clothing and ask her to wash it after Tisha B'Av. A bacher came back from yeshiva. He wants to bring his mother's dirty clothing to wash after Tisha B'Av. Here we said there's a halacha that you can't give clothing to the laundromat in the 9 days to wash after Tisha B'Av because you can't even give it to them, even if you tell them to wash it after Tisha B'Av. So how can a husband bring to his wife his clothing or a bacher in yeshiva? The answer is that's not called giving to a laundromat. That's called bringing it home. And since she's not going to wash it now, the laundromat, the goyish laundromat, might wash it. So even though practically she's not going to wash it, there's a form of hesach hadas from Avel's effect. You give it to the laundromat, you feel better. You give it to the laundromat, even though you told them to do it after Tisha B'Av. When you give it to the mother, to your wife, to whatever it is, there's no simcha, there's no hesach hadas from Avel's. You just bring it home. That's not really a problem. Washing a sheitel is also forbidden. If there's a great need to wash a sheitel, there's room for leniency because it's associated with tznius and it's not mamash a regular garment, except for the week of Tisha B'Av, which is really more severe. Again, that's only Tisha B'Av this year. That you shouldn't wash a sheitel, but to comb a sheitel, even using chemicals to set it all up properly, to make short of the sheitel anyhow is more making it more tzniusdik. That's perfectly fine. If there's a hefsid, there's a loss in the garment. For example, there's a garment, if you don't wash it, it will get moldy. That's not called removing your mind from mourning, and that's permissible. The prohibition of washing is because it takes your mind off mourning. It is a positive thing. You're going to be having freshly laundered clothing. But in this case, it's just to protect from a loss, that's fine. When it comes to washing children's clothing, in the halachas, you're not allowed to wash children's clothing either, although there are opinions, which is the primary opinion, that until Shabbos Chazon, you're allowed to. That when I say children, I mean children that regular children that always soil their clothing, then you're allowed to wash their clothing, but you just can't add other clothing while you're already washing the clothing of those kids that soil the clothing. What does it mean, kids that soil the clothing? Normally that means up to 6 years old, up to the age of chinuch. If it's extremely dirty and you're stuck, you could be lenient even further. But ideally, you should have it done through a goy or through a child or whatever it is. Children that regularly soil their clothing, which we said you're allowed to wash their clothing, that doesn't only apply to children, they are adults, senior citizens that sometimes soil their clothing regularly too, especially people that suffer from incontinence or whatever it is. So it'll be the same exact heter to wash their clothing, the same as a heter to wash little children's clothing. But you're only allowed to wash these children's clothing if they need them now. To wash clothing because they need them for after Tisha B'Av, that's for sure not permissible. Unless, again, it's extremely soiled and it'll get ruined. Ironing is a problem. Again, whether you're ironing clothing to wear them now or you're ironing clothing to put them away for later. If it's ironing something which you could wear without ironing, and the ironing does not involve any liquid, modern day form of ironing, then there's room for leniency. Polishing shoes, questionable. Is that called washing? Is that called laundering? So certainly if it comes to covered Shabbos, you need to have nice shoes for Shabbos. You don't have to be machmer about polishing shoes. You have to understand that whenever you're going to be polishing shoes with covered Shabbos, it's never going to be the week of Tisha B'Av. Because after Shabbos, that's always the week of Tisha B'Av. And since it's not even the week of Tisha B'Av, so it's not even that severe, and it's l'kavet Shabbos, there's no reason to be machmer. So till now we spoke about laundering clothing. There's another prohibition that not only you're not allowed to launder clothing, you're also not allowed to wear freshly laundered iron clothing in the 9 days. So even though they were washed way before the 9 days, you're not allowed to wear them, you're not allowed to put them on your linen, same with tablecloths, all of this is forbidden in the 9 days. What's the heter? The heter that you could do is if you wore it once before the 9 days, then you're allowed to wear it in the 9 days, and we spoke about this last week, or the beginning of the week, whenever it was, that people before the Chodesh, they put on all their clothing, so in order they should be able to wear them in the 9 days, there shouldn't be any issues whatsoever. This only applies to regular clothing. Undergarments, especially nowadays that people are extremely sensitive about it, undergarments, socks, those things, the minig is that people are lenient about it and they put on freshly laundered undergarments. Those who want to be machmer, kol hakavod. It's not the week of Tisha B'Av, there's really not much reason to be machmer about that. Now, I want to go through a few details about this halacha about freshly laundered clothing. First of all, some people get mixed up. They have laundered clothing and unlaundered clothing. And usually the unlaundered clothing means clothing that they wore already once before the Chodesh. They put it on erev the Chodesh for a couple of minutes, 15, 20, 10 minutes, whatever it takes to make the garment no longer have that feeling of a freshly laundered garment. And they put away all these shirts on the side, all these tops, all these skirts, and now they got mixed up. Well, I'm not sure what that means if it's mixed up, because the whole idea is that you put it on once, it no longer looks like a laundered garment. But now if they're all mixed up, that means it's pretty much the same anyhow. So it's a question on the whole process. But either way, once they're mixed up and we don't know what's fresh, what's not fresh, you're allowed to wear all of them. Rule number one. Rule number two, a woman who's preparing for her 7 clean days is allowed to wash in order to have new clothing, white garments to wear during the 7 clean days. On Tisha B'Av, she shouldn't do that. On Tisha B'Av itself, she should just wear a clean garment. If she doesn't have a clean garment that's good, clean, she can wear a white one, which is washed because it's l'tzorech mitzvah. She also is allowed to give to a goy to wash for the mitzvah of wearing for the 7 clean days. People who have guests are allowed to wash their linen because it's not considered menschlich to give people dirty linen. Mikvahs are allowed to wash their towels, and people will know that the common mikvahs, women's mikvahs, men's mikvahs, they all have fresh towels. The real question is, the mikvah is allowed to wash the towel because the mikvah can't provide you with dirty, it's unhygienic for them to provide you with such towels. But what's your heter that you're using the freshly laundered towels for the mikvah? Why don't you bring a towel from your house? So we could come up with all kinds of explanations of what people are leaning about this. They're going to have to bring from the house. Maybe they'll stop them from going to the mikvah. Maybe they'll use dirty ones, which is not hygienic. Ideally, people should bring their own towels from the house. At least the simple solution is take the towel, put it on the floor, so it no longer has that fresh thing, and then for sure there wouldn't be a problem. Somebody, before that, for medical purposes, for infection reasons, a person who has issues with their skin, hospitals, none of these issues apply over there. It's not called an issue of simcha, and there's no problem to have freshly laundered clothing in all of those circumstances. When it comes to a stain, it is one isolated stain, especially a stain that stands out and really ugly. It's not a problem. The problem is when you're washing an entire garment, but one isolated stain is fine. Somebody is stuck and he has only one garment to wear. The halacha is that you're allowed to, if he only has one garment, all his clothing are all dirty. In other words, not that we're dirty because they were worn once, because that's what you're supposed to wear, something that's worn once, but they're dirty, they're not wearable, they smell. And he only has one garment, that's all he has. He's allowed to wash that garment and wear that garment. That only applies the week before Tisha B'Av. The halacha is so extreme that the week of Tisha B'Av, in other words, this year on Tisha B'Av itself, even if a person has only one garment, all the clothing became dirty, he's not allowed to wash. So what do you do with people who have not allowed to wash their clothing? All the clothing are dirty. They're not very well organized. They didn't put on clothing for the 9 days. They have clothing that normally people change every single day, especially undergarments. What should they do? Or even overgarments, but it's extremely uncomfortable, not just slightly uncomfortable. It causes a lot of tsar. Or overgarments, it's embarrassing to walk around like that. So we'll allow with the following manner. When it comes to undergarments, better to buy new ones, put them on the floor. If you can't buy new ones, we'll allow him to wash whatever he needs to wash, ideally through a guy. When it comes to overgarments, like a shirt or pants, it's much more serious to buy such garments. Then you should not buy new garments and rather just wash one garment, which you're allowed to do. With a shirt which usually has a lot of sweat on it. So the doichid gadol, if somebody is really tight, they can wash mamish only what they need. And again, they should put it first on the floor. For children, that the halacha is that we're allowed to wash clothing for them, then we're also allowed to put them on freshly laundered clothing. There's no purpose in washing clothing if we're not going to put them on. Shabbos is a whole different story. L'kavod Shabbos, you're allowed to wear freshly laundered clothing like every single other Shabbos, but you're not allowed to wear brand new clothing. Unless somebody's stuck and he doesn't have any clothing, and he has to have new ones, not chashuv clothing, they make shechianu on them, but plain clothing. In this case, if somebody has no freshly laundered clothing, he's allowed to even wear new clothing for Shabbos. You're allowed to put a new tablecloth, a freshly laundered tablecloth on the table for Shabbos. Sheets, the minhag is that we don't put on new sheets for Shabbos. Somebody that puts on sheets every single week, fresh sheets for Shabbos, is room for leniency. Pajamas, you're allowed to put on new ones for Shabbos if you normally put on special Shabbos. No, I mean laundered pajamas. If you do that every single week, you change for Shabbos pajamas. I don't know who has that minhag. In the 9 days, you're not supposed to wear big day Shabbos also. We mentioned a kind of newly laundered clothing. You can't wear big day Shabbos unless it's Shabbos. If it's a bris, father, a mother, the samdik, the moil, whatever it is, a pidin aben, the parents, a bar mitzvah for the bar mitzvah boy for the parents, there's a special heter to wear for the immediately close relatives to wear big day Shabbos. Otherwise, big day Shabbos are forbidden in the 9 days. For a shidduch, and if a girl does not have other nice clothing, we allow her to wear Shabbos clothing when she's going to meet a boy. She's allowed to wear even freshly laundered clothing if she doesn't have clothing that are not laundered, because this is for the purpose of a shidduch. And the minig is in a lot of schools that finish in the 9 days, and they have an end of year graduation that the boys wear a white shirt, even though it's a Shabbos garment. It's not really a weekday garment; it's a Shabbos garment, and they're making cover that Torah for a C and for a graduation to wear a white shirt. I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is about eating meat and drinking wine in the 9 days. Minadin, from the Gemara's perspective, the problem of eating meat and drinking wine is only on Erev Tisha B'Av. Not when it's on Shabbos like this year, but B'chlal. The minig is that we, from Rosh Chodesh, including Rosh Chodesh, until Tisha B'Av, we don't eat meat or drink wine. When I say eating meat and drink wine, that means chicken, salt, meat, even meat that's been salted, frozen, and dried up, even something that's been cooked with meat. If something was cooked in a meat pot, even though it was cooked that very day, it's a ben yoime, cooked within 24 hours, you're allowed to eat the pasta cooked in the fleshige pot. But anything that has meat in it should not be eaten. You're also allowed to eat soup that has onions that were cut with a fleshige knife. It doesn't have the regular halachos of basa b'cholov. Children that are not the age of avela, so children primarily, again, under 6 years old, are allowed to eat meat in the 9 days. Someone who is not well, even if it's not a major sickness. Someone who they have an allergy for milk. Milk is harmful for them. A woman that's expecting or nursing. And if the mother's not going to eat meat, it's no good for the child. Allowed to eat meat, they should eat chicken. If they have no chicken, then they should eat regular meat. Today's day and age, there's so many different options of healthy food, and we don't have to resort to eating chicken or even meat. We should eat all the other foods, provided it's not going to be harmful for the expecting, nursing, allergy person, etc. Also, there's an option you can always hear a siyum. If a person is not well, but they know that milk works fine for them, of course there's no heter for them to eat meat. A woman after birth, even if she's not nursing, but she's 30 days from birth, and she needs to have meat or wine, then they should allow to have meat or wine. But ideally, from the Zayin B'Av, the 7th day of Av is a bit more serious. If possible, there's no sickness of Av. It's just because she gave birth and she really needs this meat or wine. Then from the Zayin B'Av onwards, they should be machmer. If a person made a bracha on meat in the 9 days by mistake, they took a piece of meat, made a bracha on wine, we don't want the bracha to be a bracha of atala, but they also don't eat meat in the 9 days. So they should eat a tiny bit of meat or drink a tiny bit of wine. When you eat a tiny bit, it's not called simcha, it's not called going against the minig. It's just a tiny bit in order there shouldn't be a bracha of atala, and then move on to eat something else. If meat fell by mistake into a food, then if the 60 against the meat, it's batal b'shishma, you're allowed to eat that food in the 9 days. Wine is also forbidden. Wine includes also grape juice or a food that has wine in it. Wine vinegar is fine, beer is fine, mashke is fine, but anything else with wine is a problem. If somebody needs for the four, they need to have wine or grape juice. So you can mix the wine or grape juice with water. So much that you don't make a better guffin on it because there's just a tiny bit of wine in it. So for the full, we allow that. If it's not for medical reasons, you shouldn't even have mixed with other drinks wine. When it comes to benching on a kos, the minig is that we don't, in the 9 days, we don't drink wine for kosher bracha. We give it to a child that's the age of chinuch. That's the interesting age of chinuch. We'll talk about more details about this at Abdullah. It needs to be the age of chinuch for brachas. So when you're going to make the ber priagafen, you could exempt him because he's already the age of chinuch for making brachas. But he's not the age of chinuch for morning in Yerushalayim, and you give the child to drink a majority of the Revi'is Malay Ludmov. If there's no child around, then we just don't do kosher bracha. And if a person benched on a kos, and he's all of a sudden he realized, hey, there's no kid over here, just don't drink from it. We don't drink wine for kosher bracha in the 9 days. In a Sudas mitzvah, we'll allowed to eat meat, drink wine, and make a bench on a kos. For example, bris milah, pidna ben, bar mitzvah, if it's celebrated on the day when the mitzvah happens, a siyum masechta. But there's a few conditions attached to this halacha. The halacha that you're allowed to eat meat and drink wine means anybody that's part of the meal. Part of the meal means someone that would normally, under normal circumstances, not in the 9 days, also join the meal, either because they're related or they're close friends, even men or women, in a place where it's normal to invite women for such a meal. But someone who's going to eat at home because they sent them food from the meal, of course he can't eat that. Likewise, there are people that normally they wouldn't go to the meal. Oh, now we have a chaperah, drink wine, eat meat. That's called a mitzvah above aveda. They're going for a mitzvah. It's real aveda. They're not going because sudas mitzvah. They're going because they want to drink wine. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't go. Now, normally, there's no limitations on this. It's anybody that would normally go is perfectly fine. But in the week of Tisha B'Av, which this year it's not relevant because the week of Tisha B'Av is only a Tisha B'Av. The week of Tisha B'Av, there's limitations on how many people you can invite to this sudas mitzvah. It has to be exact minute plus relatives, etc. And that's why many people have a minig that b'chlal, even by sudas mitzvah, they don't serve meat or wine. They just serve other drinks and they serve fish because they don't want to start having questions who I should invite, who I shouldn't invite. Anybody could come. I'm not going to go into shalos. But strictly speaking, and many chassidim are makbid dafka to do so. It's a sudas bris, it's a sudas mitzvah. They'll serve meat and drink wine. The minig became that in the cities yesteryear, they would take the shchita knives and hide them all when it comes to Rosh Chodesh Av, because they wouldn't shecht anymore. So the shachtim would go and hide all the knives and put them aside. They would only shecht for a mitzvah, for example, someone who's sick, or for Shabbos, or for a bris. Nowadays, we live in very big cities, and there's always someone that needs meat, whether because they just gave birth, whether because they're weak, whether because they're not well. We need meat for Shabbos, and we, Baruch Hashem, eat a lot. So the minig is no longer the same way, the minig of hiding the shchita knives. It's just shchita goes on almost as normal. Talking about that, I will mention an interesting shaila. Are you allowed to cook meat in the 9 days in order to have it for after Tisha B'Av? After all, they used to hide the shechita knives. They didn't even shecht, even though it's only for later. The answer is yes. You are allowed to cook meat, especially if the meat will go off. Oh, you're doing it for a mitzvah. But even otherwise, you're allowed to cook. There's no halacha. You're not allowed to cook meat in the 9 days. You just have to be careful not to eat from it. Cutting nails. There's no prohibition against cutting nails in the 9 days. The whole issue of cutting nails is only in the week of Tisha B'Av, which is always after Shabbos Chazayin, and this year that means on Tisha B'Av proper. But the week of Tisha B'Av, you know, cut nails, manicure, pedicure, all a problem. The woman has to go to the mikveh. What's a Tisha B'Av? If there's a question of chatzitza on the hand, all those things, then for washing, whatever it is, then there's no problem to cut nails. And here comes the tough one, the halachos about showering. I'll tell you what the actual halacha is, and then we'll talk about implementation. The halacha is that one is not allowed to wash their entire body for pleasure, even in cold water, in the 9 days. They're allowed to rinse off their head, their face, their hands, their feet, meaning something which is not the majority of the body, using cold water. Cold water in this context means not hot. Not hot. Hot means the temperature that people normally bathe with when they enjoy the heat of the water. In people's language, it's called hot water. If you're only making it hot just because you want to take away the chill, that's not called hot. So there's a level of a shower or bath where that's how people normally bathe in. That's called hot. And if it's a tiny bit under that, lukewarm, it's just that it shouldn't be cold. That's not called hot. So you're allowed to wash with so-called cold, lukewarm water, face, feet, hands, head, and the other parts of the body, as long as you're not washing the majority of the body. That is the halacha. Now, in that halacha itself, if a person, if for whatever reason, for intimacy purposes, it's going to affect the mitzvah, it'll affect the husband or wife, one of them will be uncomfortable, the other one doesn't shower. It'll cause tsar. And for some reason, washing face, hands, and feet, or other parts of the body is not enough, then they are allowed to wash their entire body. It's actually a mitzvah for them to wash their entire body to make sure that the mitzvah of intimacy continues in an appropriate way. That was not part of the minig. The same thing when we talk about asking questions about going to sprinklers, kids going and using sprinklers. I'm not talking about little kids, which anyhow is no problem to bathe them. If it's going to be in such a way that it's only affecting the face, hands, feet, not the majority of the body, there's no problem. However, that's the halacha. Now, if a person is dirty, or he has sweat, I'm talking about not minor sweat, but sweat where a person can't handle the smell, and some people are sensitive and even a minor amount of sweat, then they're allowed to shower. Like we said before, face, hands, and feet. If for whatever reason, face, hands, and feet is not enough, then they're allowed to go and wash the rest of the body because for some reason they're also sticky and dirty, but not the entire body at once, bit by bit. And if lukewarm won't work and it won't be cleaned through lukewarm water, then they can allow to use hot water. And if that won't work, they'll allow to use soap. Because this is done now mishum nekiyas for cleanliness, and it's not called tainug, but it's as much as needed, only as much as needed. In this case, the person should take a private shower, not in a public mikveh, in a men's mikveh, where everybody's, oh, because I'm part of the heter. It's not a public heter. The rule is you're not supposed to take showers on the 9 days. This person is very sweaty and very sticky, whatever it is. Heat is not a reason to be makel in the halacha of taking showers. The only heter is face, hands, feet, lukewarm water. Bichlal, a person with this heter in place should minimize as much as possible, change from the regular procedure, even if a person is in pain, especially in the week of Tisha B'Av, which is not this year's Tisha B'Av anyhow, because our Beis Hamikdash deserves that a person should cut out a bit of what they do normally. A Yireh Hashem will know when to be lenient and when not to be lenient. So even when there is leniency, cut it out once in 2 days, once in 3 days, less bit by bit, not using soap, not using shampoo, whatever it is. And just to put things in a bit of context of here so people should understand this halacha. Even in people talk today how it's very hot today and today is different than the past. So there were poskim that actually wrote in the previous generations that in the days of it's so hot and people are so sweaty and they become like an isthmus, like that they become like highly sensitive people and they're not really washing for pleasure. This was written hundreds of years ago, but the halacha was not like that. And as the poskim say, that we should protest against those people that are washing themselves. Take into account also that in the past, people used to work in fields and they still didn't wash. Nowadays, we find ourselves in air-conditioned rooms, so we should be more machmer. The people that every single year ask Hatera for washing the 9 days. Now, when it comes to while they're mourning for a father or mother, the week of Shiva, not too many people come and ask a Heter. But for some reason, the 9 days, people don't feel the hergish of Churban and Golus, and therefore they're looking for kulas. Now, I understand, it's not the same as Avelos for a parent, because normally people, when they're sitting Shiva, they don't leave their house. So it's not exactly the same, but to put things in context, it's important to understand that this is for the Churban, something that and although throughout the year we engage in practices of Simcha, the 9 days as well, this is our Avelos time for the Churban Beis Hamikdash. But again, there's still room to be lenient if it's not for pleasure, it's not the week of Tisha B'Av, it's a takeaway sweat, it's a lot of sweat. So there's definitely room for these leniencies as mentioned. Some people want to introduce the idea that also shouldn't anoint yourself in the 9 days, but that's not correct. It's only washing. It does not apply to anointing. Anointing is only issue on Tisha B'Av. Because we don't wash in the 9 days, we also don't go swimming. We don't go swimming in a pool, and we don't go swimming in an ocean, in a sea. Kids under 6 years old, we could be lenient, but there's an issue of danger. We try not to do things that are dangerous. Mikveh for men. Person was careful to go to mikveh those times we need to go to the mikveh, and they never mevatel the mitzvah of mikveh, whether and after intimacy, whatever it is, they're allowed to go and do mikveh as they always do. And even if sometimes they're not so particular because it's cold or whatever reason, okay, so but basically they're nizar and they're allowed to go to mikveh the 9 days. Those who go to mikveh always before davening, they continue their minig these days, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the minig is that the minig is that mikveh is hot. We don't make cold mikvehs, but you're not supposed to sit and spend time in the mikveh. You're supposed to in the mikveh and out of the mikveh. We're not going there for a shower. We're not going for a bath. We're going there for the mitzvah of mikveh. And of course, if it's for a mitzvah, like for Shabbos, we take regular showers with hot water and soap, as we'll talk momentarily when we get to the halachos of Shabbos. When it comes to someone who's not well and they're washing for the refuah, a woman that's expecting, a woman she's giving birth, she just gave birth, and they need to have a shower, then it's fine. Again, in the 9 days, this is not called for pleasure, it's called for pain relief or whatever else, that's fine. A dry sauna, not a wet sauna with steam, is also permissible. That's not considered washing. Makeup is fine. Nail polish is fine. Of course, it's sneezing in fashion. That's not going to include in the issue of washing. A woman that's going to the mikvah in the 9 days, she does a regular chafifa and bathes herself as way she always does with hot water. She goes to the mikvah. If she's going to the mikvah after Tisha B'Av, Matzah Tisha B'Av, then she'll take a shower on Erev Tisha B'Av. This year, it's Shabbos, so she'll take a shower on Erev Shabbos. And Matzah Tishba, she does another chafifa, but she has to be careful. There shouldn't have any chatzitza, etc. For hefsiktada purposes, for cleaning before the 7 clean days, she could wash whatever she needs. It's done for the mitzvah, but not a bath is totally unnecessary to take before a hefsik. And if there's no reason to be matter a bath for a woman that's doing a hefsik, but to wash around the area a little bit, that's perfectly fine in the 9 days as well. Another halacha about the 9 days is the halacha of sewing clothing. Who still sews? So the halacha is you're not allowed to sew or fix and make new clothing, new shoes. The meaning is even old shoes, but we're talking about fixing old clothing or old shoes is a proper fixing. A small minor thing which doesn't require a professional. It's ripped up and need to sew something. That's not included in the Isser. Making new clothing, tailoring new clothing for someone who's going to get married. They have no wife and kids. They're going to be mekayim mitzvah of piri v'divid, so the first marriage. And a chassan can't need new clothing is permissible. Even on Tisha B'Av itself, a guy could go do it. And the father of the chassan could have new clothing, and a mother, not other relatives. A person who's a professional tailor, and he's making clothing for other people, so he's not allowed to do that, whether he's doing it for free or for money. Even if he's doing it for a guy, it's also a problem. Already from the Chodesh, only from the week of Tisha B'Av. If everybody knows it's being done from a guy, then there's a heter. And if a person doesn't have what to eat, and if he's not going to continue his business, he's going to go hungry, of course he's allowed to do that in any case. But we should try to avoid doing this of working in the tailoring industry in the 9 days as much as possible. Even though, according to the halacha, if a tailor is allowed to make new clothing for a yid, if you got it from him before the Chodesh, but all these things we try to minimize as much as possible, particularly in the week of Tisha B'Av. We also don't do weaving because the Evan Shasiyah, which is where the Beis Hamikdash stands on, was destroyed. We no longer have the Beis Hamikdash. Shasiyah comes from the word shesi, which has to do with weaving. Therefore, we don't weave and we don't spin threads. Sorry, we don't weave, but we could spin threads. Girls that are learning tailoring should not do this during these days. Unless someone needs to do knitting because of their nerves and to calm down, then they're allowed to do the 9 days also. Lanyard is also permissible the 9 days. Moving on to another thing about the 9 days, which the Rebbe encouraged very, very much, is the idea of siyumim. The Rebbe asked to publicize in all possible places about making a siyum in all the 9 days, and because Chamisha Asabav is a follow-up to Tisha B'Av, we should continue making siyum until Chamisha Asabav. If we finish Halachos and Rambam, we should include that as part of the siyum also. I believe we're going to be finishing one of these days, maybe it's tomorrow, a full sefer of Rambam, Sefer Yisrael, and we're actually going to be starting Hilchos Beis Abchira in the 9 days. And the purpose of the siyum is that we should increase in simcha in a permissible way. By having simcha in a permissible way, we nullify anything which is the opposite of simcha. So that's a very good thing for us to have simcha. And we'll continue making siyum even when Mashiach comes. But nowadays, when we make a siyum of everything. We make a siyum of gullus. We don't get rid of gullus. We're making a siyum of gullus, meaning we take the gullus and transform it into gula by putting the aleph into the word gula. Aleph is Hashem and having gula. And these siyum should be done publicly. Men should come to the siyum. Women should come to the siyum. Obviously not together with the proper mechitza. Children should come to the siyum. Talking about women, there's no problem for a woman to finish a mesechta and to say a hadron. She's not allowed to say kaddish. And there's a suda that's considered a proper suda's mitzvah. But generally, we try to avoid doing that. We should avoid doing that. Anything that looks is associated with reform or conservatism, which with equal rights, which is not a Torah concept, we shouldn't do. But in a place which is a private thing, it's not an order that a woman should be like a man. The issue of a woman trying to copy a man or vice versa is a problem al pi Torah. But if it's just for the etzem inyan, and it's in a private manner, it's perfectly fine. Likewise, if a child finishes a mesechta, it's also a sudas mitzvah, and under the conditions that you're allowed to eat wine or eat meat or drink wine, that will be permissible. And the kaddish, in this case, is said through an adult who's over mitzvah when a child finishes a mesechta. The way it works is that when a person is making the siyum right before he finishes the siyum, everybody gets around him. He says the last few words, people join, and then a suda is made. And the Rebbe asked we should try to arrange every siyum should be associated with a suda or a farbrengen. And with tzedakah. On Shabbos you can't give tzedakah, give ruchnis the good tzedakah, and after Shabbos, you give Gashmis the good tzedakah. It's permissible tzedakah on Shabbos, give something to eat, something to drink. Otherwise, on the weekday, we have a tzedakah pushka there before the Siyum, middle of the Siyum, people who are there by the Siyum will put money into tzedakah. The Rebbe Rashab would make Siyum in the 9 days, and he would do the Siyum even though he didn't have meat or wine. The reason why the Rebbe Rashab made a Siyum every one of the 9 days, he had to have meat for health reasons. But he didn't want to use out the Torah as a way to have meat. So he decided he's going to make a Siyum other days also, not only on those days when he's going to be eating meat. But the Rebbe quoted this many, many times on the Rebbe Rashab's minig, and he told us that the idea of making a Siyum is independent of the idea of eating meat and drinking wine. According to the halacha, if it's a proper Siyum and people would join the Siyum, even in other times because they're friends, then they're allowed to eat meat and drink wine. Unless it's the week of Tisha, which again doesn't apply this year, then only an exact min and relatives are allowed to join the Siyum and eat meat and drink wine. So if it follows the proper conditions of a Siyum, there's nothing halachically wrong with eating meat or drinking wine. But the problem is sometimes the person is rushing the Siyum and pushing off the Siyum to make it dafka in the 9 days. And that's the shtickle shaila, to make a Siyum in the 9 days with meat and wine. And planning it like this for the 9 days. But if a person that's what he's up to right now, then you shouldn't go and say, no, I don't want to do it in the 9 days, let me push it off to later. Why should you push it off later? Make the Siyum now. But in a lot of places, they were lenient, even if they try to schedule to fall out of the 9 days. Either way, if this is the proper time of the Siyum, and the people that are joining the Siyum would otherwise join in other times also, then they're allowed to eat meat or drink wine. But a person who otherwise normally when he finishes the Masechta doesn't make a Suda, and all of a sudden now in the 9 days, let me make a Suda, let me have meat, let me have wine, and that's a whole different story. Then you can't have the meat and wine included in the Siyum. If a person normally makes a Suda, but this time he wants to add meat to the menu, that's fine. But as mentioned, there are places that a lot of people had the minute, even in the Sudas Mitzvah, they wouldn't eat meat or drink wine, because then you have to go into whole Shiloh. Who should I invite? Who am I allowed to invite? Who am I not allowed to invite? Who normally would come? Normally would not come. But the Rebbe's agenda of the Siyum was purely not about the meat or wine. There is that added thing. It was purely about the idea of adding simcha. And the Rebbe encouraged you to make the Siyum through the radio, through the telephone, through other technological methods. And that's also considered participating in the Siyum. And they might be a person who would normally in other times participate, and they're now listening over the phone for whatever reason they can't come personally. There's also a heter for meat or wine. But ideally, you shouldn't rely on listening to the phone. You should come and participate in the Siyum on a personal level, especially if you're planning to eat meat or drink wine. If a person finished already a Masechta, so yeah, it's a good idea to make an event, but you can't call it a Siyum and eat meat because of that, because you already finished a Masechta. A Siyum can include a Siyum Mishnais, better it should be a Siyum of Gemara. Certainly a whole Sefer of Rambam is like a Siyum of a Masechta Gemara. If a person learned Gemara and didn't say the words inside, Torah Sheba'al Peh, it's not about saying the words, it's about understanding. They can make a Siyum. Sometimes a person comes to a Siyum, they didn't hear the Siyum. I just missed it. So when it comes to regard to meat and wine, for us the main thing is to hear the Siyum, because the main thing for us is to have the simcha of the Siyum itself. But in terms of eating meat or wine, if the person missed the Siyum and he came to the Suda associated with the Siyum, in the 9 days, not at Erev Pesach, there's room to be leading even then to have meat or wine. And what about the other way around? The person heard the Siyum and wasn't part of the meal. Can he go later and make his own meal? So if he wasn't part of the meal, if you're sending him food from the Siyum to his house, that's a whole different story. You're sending leftovers from the Suda. But here the person was there by the Siyum, he just missed the Suda. So it's like hearing the Siyum over the phone, there's room for leniency for that also. In terms of going through the 9 days, the first day of the 9 days this year is on Shabbos Chazak, Shabbos Matas. Masay Aleph Menachem Av Shchodesh, and because it's a Shchodesh, we say Hallel, which is a special thing, that even though in the 3 weeks, and even it's not only that, it's the first of the 9 days, we start off right away with Hallel, associated with Simcha, to bring Simcha to the 9 days. Of course, we remember to say Yalav Yove throughout Shabbos, and we say Chazak. Chazak means we are going to strengthen ourselves in all matters of Torah in a very strong way. It's a Chazak of the 4th Sefer of Chamish Chumash Torah, which is technically a Siyum of the whole Torah, because the 5th Sefer Devarim is already a repeat. It's Mishnah Torah, repeat of what it says in Torah. So when we went through the 3 weeks, which was a terrible Yerida, a terrible descent, we need a special chizuk. We have a very strong chizuk on Torah, chazak, with this chazak, a triple chizuk, which hints to the chazak of the 3rd Beis Hamikdash on the 3rd Gula. When it comes to the Torah, I think there's some booklets that came out, Dvar Malchus Chayenu, one of them, I don't know which one it is. I think one of the Israeli Dvar Malchus maybe, that doesn't have the right Haftorah, So I will mention it over here. There's two opinions which I've told to say when it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh in the 3 weeks. Do you say the one associated with the 3 weeks or the one for Shabbos Rosh Chodesh? Our meaning is we say the Haftarah of Shimu, which is the Haftarah of the 3 weeks, not the one of Rosh Chodesh. When we finish the Haftarah, we have the first and last pasuk of Rosh Chodesh. The Rebbe Rashab once said, one time there was such a quiz, he said, the Haftarah of Hashamayim Kisid Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Haftarah, and he was upset afterwards. He said, no, that's not what should be done. And we should say the Haftarah of the 9 days of the Parsha of Matas Maseh, and add the first and last pasuk of Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. But because it's Rosh Chodesh, so in davening, the Avarachim was not said before Musaf. In Musaf, it's Rosh Chodesh, we're going to say the special prayer of Atu Yitzarta. We're going to conclude Mekadesh HaShabbos v'Yisrael, but Rosh Chodesh, it's Rosh Chodesh. When it comes to Matzah Shabbos, if a person is still eating their Shabbos meal, they didn't have a mind yet, they're allowed to still eat meat or wine. They're going to be saying it at Seyim benching after all. Since they're going to be saying it at Seyim benching, so it's still their Shabbos, and therefore they're allowed to eat meat or wine. Unless he said already the words Baruch HaMavdil Bekodesh L'Chol, in which case you don't say that say anymore, then he can't have meat or drink wine anymore. That's provided this person is going to be davening later Ma'adev with a minyan. If most of the community already daven Ma'adev, and he's later going to end up davening B'Yechidus, then the Yachid is affected by the Tzibur, and this person in his Shabbos meal is now going to have meat or wine because by the entire community it's already now Matzah Shabbos, and he's not joining a minyan for Ma'adev. When it comes to Havdalah, we make Havdalah on wine, but we give it to a child to drink. We give it to a boy, not to a girl, because a girl is a question if she has the mitzvah of Havdalah. And as mentioned earlier, a child that's the age of chinuch of brachas and the age of chinuch of Havdalah, but not the age of chinuch for Avelis. Avelis is an older age. To reach the chinuch for Avelis, that could be more like 10, 11 years old. Unfortunately, today, a lot of adults don't understand the idea of mourning. So he understands brachas, he understands Havdalah, he understands Shabbos. He's intending to be Yotz with Havdalah, but he's not yet the age of mourning him if he could drink the wine. So we make the bracha ber begaf, and we have in mind the child should be Yotza, and the child should drink at least Malay Lugmav, a majority of her revius. A woman who's making Havdalah, so she should not give it to a child, because the child might not be Yotza Havdalah from a woman, because the question of a woman is Chayav and Havdalah. She should give it to a child, a female child, which could be Yotza from a woman, not to a male child, which cannot be Yotza from a woman. If a person's making Havdalah, there's no child around, then he could drink it himself. And you could drink the entire cup. You don't have to start counting how much am I drink. Whatever it is in the cup, you could drink the entire cup. That's not a problem. It's between the two choices of making Havdalah yourself over wine or making Havdalah of a grape juice and giving it to a child, because the child doesn't want to drink wine. It's better you shouldn't drop the standards of making Havdalah on wine and drink it yourself. What happens if you went and you had in mind the child should drink, and now the child he doesn't want to drink? And that happens with kids. So the adult will have to make a new Ber Priagafen, because the first Ber Priagafen he wasn't planning to drink when he said it. He was planning to give it to their child. So he has to make a new Ber Priagafen. Same if the child drank but didn't drink the shear, then the adult has to make a bracha and drink a proper shear. B'di'eved, child drank a little bit. The adult didn't drink, you don't have to make again Havdalah, but it's a good idea to hear Havdalah from someone else. But if nobody drank, not a child, not an adult, you're not Yotze Havdalah. And if some time passed and it was Hesech Hadas, or there was a Hefsik a long time in between, new Havdalah should be made. Sometimes a child, you give him to drink, but he made it after Havdalah, he starts talking. If he starts talking, he has to make a new bracha. If the child went and made his own Ber Priagafen, you don't have to worry about bracha Batala. Let the child drink, even though he heard your Ber Priagafen again, because he has a habit of making Ber Priagafen, he made his own Ber Priagafen again. You don't drink, give the child to drink, everything like normal. For Malava Malka, even those who would normally eat meat by Malava Malka, in the 9 days they can't eat meat, and even if they have a normal minig like that, they don't need to do a Teres and Durham. In the 9 days we don't eat meat. Moving on to the 9 days, on Hay of, which is Wednesday this year, is the day of the Yartzeit of the Arizal. Arizal is known as Arizal HaChai. And the Rebbe asked we should make sure, Dafka, on the day of Hay of, the Yartzeit of the Arizal, we should add extra tzedakah before Shachar, before Mincha. We should learn some of the Torah of the Arizal, and we should think about lessons from the Arizal's behavior in terms of limit Torah. The two key themes for the 9 days is Mishpat and Tzedakah, Torah and Tzedakah. We should add now learning Torah, particularly Pnimis HaTorah, which the Arizal was about learning the inner secrets of Torah, for an extra effort in that, and add now doing mitzvahs. based on the Kabbalah of Arizal. Arizal would work very hard when he learned Torah. It says he would be like a lion, he would start sweating. So we have to put an extra effort in learning Nigel and Pnimis HaTorah. That reason when he gave tzedakah was not stingy. He gave tzedakah without any cheshbonos. He would put his hand to his pocket, or whatever money came out, that's what he paid. He didn't count. So we have to take on that idea too. That Arizal had simcha shel mitzvah. That Arizal said that the reason why he had ruach hakodesh because he was always happy when he did a mitzvah. So let's adopt that too. That Arizal taught us we should accept the mitzvah of haf l'rach kamecha. Let's accept that too. Make sure we do a haf l'rach kamecha before davening. And Bechlal, the idea of spreading at the Mayana, spreading Chassidus, spreading Pnimis HaTorah, the idea of that Arizal, that's the message of Hey Of. Later in the week we have Zion of. Zion of, the Gemara says, is the day when the Goyim went into the Beis Hamikdash, and the fire they lit the fire on the 9th of Av. The reason we're told that the 7th of Av the Goyim came to the Beis Hamikdash is not to make us feel bad, is to tell us that we have to do more effort and bring the Gul in Beis Hamikdash. When Hayom Me'il and Eskarim and Asim, every year the same thing repeats itself again. We see another year passed, another day passed, another day passed. We still not Zechet Gula. And not only stam a day passed, it's a day that something really terrible happened, that the Goyim came to the Beis Hamikdash. That's only to give us almanas, to give us extra chiz that we should demand that Mashiach should come from the depths of our heart. That's the reason we're told that today they came to the Beis Hamikdash to turn the Yerida into an Aliyah. And later on in the week, we have Erev Shabbos, which is also Zion of. Erev Shabbos, I mentioned earlier, we wear freshly loaded clothing like every single other Shabbos. Not new clothing, but freshly loaded clothing. You could change the Shabbos clothing the same time you normally change every Friday. You don't have to wait till it's mom's close to Shabbos. You put in a freshly new tablecloth, but we don't change sheets, linen for Shabbos. You're allowed to cut nails, as mentioned earlier. If necessary, you're allowed to taste the Shabbos food while you're preparing it, but don't swallow it, spit it out. Kids that eat their Shabbos meal early, an hour or two before Kabbalah Shabbos, in the long summer days, they don't wait till after Ma'ariv. Even if they're over 60 years old, you can give them fleishiks already then. And as mentioned, our minigas, although a lot of places they don't have this minig, but now at least nowadays in our circles, where every single Friday we take a proper shower for Shabbos with hot water and with soap, so it's permissible also in the 9 days. And we, as always, go to the mikveh to cover Shabbos. Then comes Shabbos, which is Shabbos Chazoin. Chazoin means vision. And here, vision means not only we see the Beis Hamikdash from far, but hopefully we'll see the Beis Hamikdash close. The Beis Hamikdash kipshuta in this physical world. We know the Baditchva said that on this Shabbos, every person is shown a vision of the Beis Hamikdash, and he gave a whole mashal of a child that had a garment ripped, and the father showed him eventually the garment from far. And here the Yosef shows us the Beis Hamikdash. The Rebbe spoke about this mashal countless times. If you want more information about this mashal, there's a lot of details about this in the halacha guide that came up for the 3 weeks. A lot of the stuff that we're going through in the shir is there, plus much more. We can't go through everything. But particularly about this mashal about Shabbos Chazoin. It says that Shabbos Chazoin is greater than all the Shabbos of the whole entire year. It's in fact, in some ways, greater than all Yom Tovim. So let's understand that and internalize a special message, this unique Shabbos Chazoin. When it comes to davening on Shabbos Chazoin, we sing L'chadoidi regularly without any questions, even though it's right before Tisha. We sing with extra simcha. We go to mikvah on this Shabbos the same way we go on every single Shabbos. When we say the Haftorah of Shabbos Chazoin, we see all the positives in the Haftorah. The Baditchver also interpreted many things in this Haftorah in a positive way. It says, Am Keved Oven. This is a nation which is heavy with sin. Baditchver said, no, this is a nation Keved, it's heavy, it's hard. It's hard, it's a nation Keved Oven. Sin is hard for him. So there's a lot of positives in Haftorah. We have to look with the Rebbe's eyes and see how it's all positive. We say Avarachmam and then of Tisha B'Av. And the seam that we make every day, we make also on Shabbos in the 9 days. Even though it's after all it's Shabbos, why do we need the seam for? No, add extra simcha there too, and add a suda there too. There's only one thing that on this Shabbos is a question about if you're allowed to learn Torah, because it's Erev Tisha B'Av, and normally after midday we don't learn Torah on Erev Tisha B'Av. The correct thing is to learn only things that are permissible to learn on Tisha B'Av, if at all possible. If it's not possible, otherwise it will be a total bittul Torah. That's a different story. But if at all possible, we should make sure that on this Shabbos, if Mashiach Chas v'Shalom is delayed on Shabbos, not this coming Shabbos Chazoin, and after midday we should only learn things that are permissible. Chitas Rambam is all done before midday, but if it wasn't done before midday, you're allowed to learn it on Shabbos till Shkia. Shnai Mikveh Chetargim, you're allowed to make up for it. There's a regular, normal, fixed shir, you shouldn't be mevatel the shir. A regular fabregim should not be in his battle. Now, even though there's different opinions about learning Torah to Shabbos, but they all agree that you're not supposed to take walks to Shabbos, as if it's like, unless it's going to stand out because of Avelos, but it's not a time to engage in leisure and entertainment and things like that. if not all day to stop taking walks, at least from midday we shouldn't be taking walks. We daven mincha extra early in order to be able to have the Suda Mafsekes, which is, we'll get to the Suda Mafsekes in a moment, but let me just mention about the fact that people often make an early mincha, so people should be able to have another meal before the fast. And in mincha we don't say tzidkaska because it's Erev Tisha B'Av after midday. Pirkei Avos after mincha is a very interesting thing, because the Rebbe spoke about this publicly. In the same kviyas, Shabbos was Erev Tisha B'Av, Shabbos was of Tavshim Mem Aleph, and he said he does not want to rule about whether he should say Pirkei Avos or not in such a kviyas. After all, it's a regular kviyas that we always do, but not that we don't learn Torah. Only things that are permissible. So the Rebbe said, what I'm going to do is as follows. Publicly, I'm not going to say. And I'm not, what I'm doing in my room, I'm either going to say in my room or not saying, I'm not saying what I'm doing, and everybody should make their own decision and decide themselves and work out whether they should say Pirkei Avos. The general minig became by Anash that we don't say Pirkei Avos, even though the Rebbe didn't rule on this, but it seems from many different implications, people understood that the right thing is not to say Pirkei Avos. It came the following week, after the Rebbe said this from Sicha, so people said, oh, we could work out very simply what the Rebbe did last Shabbos. Let's see which Perek he says this Shabbos. So the Rebbe said last week there were those that said Pirkei Avos, and there were those that didn't say Pirkei Avos. So those that said last week Perek Gimel are going to be saying now this week Perek Dal. Those that didn't saying this week Perek Gimel. So that's going to create the lack of achdus. So what should happen this week? Even if someone said Perek Gimel, they should repeat again Perek Gimel this week. So there was no way to work out what the Rebbe did, and that's indeed the meaning. People generally don't say Pirkei Avos on Shabbos Erev Tisha B'Av, but the next week everybody says Perek Gimel regardless of what they did on Shabbos Erev Tisha B'Av. Shabbos, whether it's Erev Tisha B'Av, even if Shabbos falls on Tisha B'Av itself, people eat meat, we drink wine, even in the last meal right before the fast, we don't eat eggs with ashes, we don't sit on the floor, we eat and drink whatever we need, we eat mamash like Shlomo Melech ate his, the best meal that he ate, B'shaita Be'ez Malchus when he was a king. In fact, we add to more than what we eat on a regular Shabbos. We do a proper zimun. Normally on Erev Tisha B'Av, Suda Mafsekes, we're not supposed to make a zimun. That we don't have that restriction over here. There is a Suda Mafsekes is not a necessity. You don't have to do a Suda Mafsekes even during the week, but the minig is to do a special extra meal right before the fast. It says that people should not sit and spend time with friends, even when they're eating on Erev Tisha B'Av, they're going to be eating a full-fledged meal with meat and wine, they shouldn't sit and have it with friends. It doesn't mean family, and it doesn't mean someone that every single Shabbos does that has a big meal with a bunch of friends. Then it's going to stand out. He's having public morning on Shabbos. That's no good. Some people take pills to make it easier to fast. Those pills you're allowed to take on Shabbos, but it's best to mix it with the food before Shabbos, so it's like you're having an applesauce and you're putting this kalet tzom into it. And you should not say that you're taking it in order to be able to fast at night. You also shouldn't say when you're eating, I'm eating extra in order to fast at night. So it shouldn't be a form of preparing from weekday to Shabbos. Normally at the end of Suda Mafsekes, you're supposed to, once you finish the meal of Suda Mafsekes, it's considered a fast started, and you need to make a stipulation if you want to eat or drink after the meal, that you want to continue eating until Shkia. In this year, when it's on Shabbos, you don't have to make that stipulation. But you shouldn't be eating anything that will make sweetness stay in your mouth by the time of the fast. And when you swallow your spit, you'll swallow that sweetness, and that's a problem. Swallowing spit itself is not a problem, but swallowing licorice or something like that, which keeps the sweetness in your house, you shouldn't have. We stop eating and drinking before Shkia. As soon as it comes Shkia sunset, you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't wash, you can't anoint yourself, and we should inform people about this. People shouldn't make a mistake. It's not like every other Shabbos. The minute Shkia hits, you can't eat or drink any of these things. But we don't take off our shoes and sit on the floor until Matzah Shabbos. You're not allowed to prepare kinnis or Tisha B'Av shoes until Shabbos comes out. It is the Chabad custom that we don't change our Shabbos clothing until after kinnis on Tisha B'Av. The person didn't bench yet from a Suda Mafsekes, it's already after Shkia, they're allowed to wash Rayam Achredim. And if it's nighttime already when they're benching, then they say Ritzei, but they do not say Nachem, which when a person eats on Tisha B'Av, they say a bracha of Nachem. They don't say Nachem because it's a meal of Erev Tisha B'Av. Moving on to Tisha B'Av itself, Tisha B'Av is the biggest Yom Tov. It's going to be a mitzvah, one of the greatest Yom Tovs, and a Yimei Sasim Simcha. We're told about that now because we have to do tshuva on the fast in a way that the fast should be transformed to Sasim and Simcha. In Mitzvah Shem, it's going to be the biggest Yom Tov, more than any other fast day that turns into a Yom Tov. And when we're fasting and saying kiddush, we have to have the greatest simcha, that we have the ability to fulfill Hashem's tzivui. Although we're fasting, we're saying kiddush and we're mourning, but the simcha that we're doing Hashem's mitzvahs is included. Tisha B'Av is the day where Mashiach was born. If Mashiach was born, that means Mashiach Mazel was strong. And the day that Mashiach's Mazel is strong is a day which is auspicious for any type of liberation and for Geula. Well, we're not supposed to take off our mind off mourning. That's a halacha. Taking off your mind means fixing yourself to something else, putting your mind to something else, doing slight work which doesn't take a long time. It doesn't need your concentration. Is okay on Tisha B'Av, unless it's during when you're saying kinnis, when you're supposed to be focused on the kinnis, and not supposed to take your mind off at all. But otherwise, throughout the day of Tisha B'Av, you're not supposed to take your mind off. Mourning means you're not supposed to put your mind to something that requires concentration. But that doesn't mean you should be in atzvos. Atzvos depression is always terrible. We have to serve Hashem at simcha. We should take into account and think about the fact that these are days that we're supposed to do tshuva. The main thing is not the fasting. Fasting is a preparation for tshuva. If people, when they're fasting, they start talking about materialism and enjoying life, they forgot about the main thing and they took the secondary aspect and forgot about the main thing. I'm going to go through quickly things that are forbidden on Tisha B'Av. We don't have a lot of time left. Eating and drinking, even a tiny bit, is forbidden on Tisha B'Av. We're allowed to touch food. Women that are expecting or nursing do fast on Tisha B'Av, the same as in Kippur, unless the danger that pregnancy is, it's high risk. It's a difficult pregnancy. She's feeling extra weak than normal. A woman that's nursing feels that her milk flow, her milk supply will stop, and they can eat normally. If a woman gave birth within 7 days, or even after 7 days, it's within 30 days, but she's still weak, she doesn't have to fast. If she feels perfectly fine and healthy and the fast won't harm her, okay, they should fast. Even, yes, it's even within 30 days, but not within 7 days. Somebody who is sick does not mean it's danger to their life. They're weak and their entire body feels weak and they need to eat. No danger. They eat. Children do not have to fast. There's no reason to make them fast. Those who don't fast should not eat publicly, should eat only secretly, not in front of other people. We don't rinse our mouth on the fast day. If somebody needs to rinse their mouth, they have some problem with the smell of their mouth, they can rinse their mouth with something with the mouthwash which is bitter and bend their head in such a way that they shouldn't swallow it. If somebody forgot and they ate, they still have to continue fasting, and they don't have to fast another day unless they want to make as a form of tshuva, but they don't really have to fast another day. Even people that don't fast, or children that are the age of Avelis, but they don't fast, shouldn't eat delicacies, certainly not meat or wine. Eat whatever they need to eat. Whoever's not fasting has to make Havdalah, and the wine is given to a child who's the age of chinuch to drink. If it's a woman that's not fasting, she will make Havdalah, but she will give it to a female child, to a girl. If there's no child around, but they make Havdalah or coffee or tea and drink it themselves. Same halacha, men or women. If a woman does not want to make her own Havdalah and she's not fasting, she can ask her husband to make Havdalah for her, even though the husband is fasting, and he will be Yotzei Havdalah, but the wine will be given to a child, to a boy who's the age of chinuch. But he shouldn't give the wine, in this case, to a girl. The Nusach Havdalah said regularly, Hine Kele Shuasi, everything is regular. We don't say the bracha of B'Samim, and the bracha of Moirei Eish, we only say when we make Havdalah on Matzah Shabbos. Generally, the minig is on Tisha B'Av. Right away when it comes Matzah Shabbos, we say the bracha of Moirei Eish. If he didn't say it yet, he would say it on Havdalah. Somebody who's not fasting, is exempt from fasting, they eat bread, a kadais of bread. When they bench, they'll add a section of Nachim before Uvnei Yerushalayim, and they'll finish with Baruch Atah Hashem Menachem Tzina B'nei Yerushalayim. If they didn't say it, they're still Yotzei benching. Before benching, Shir Amalis is said, not Al Nahan as well, Shir Amalis. After all, it's a day that we don't say Tachanun. Tisha B'Av, one B'chlal, smoking on a fasting. Technically speaking, there's a heter to smoke on a fasting for someone who regularly smokes. Tisha B'Av, one should be machmer, even if it's difficult for him, and if he has to, he should do it only secretly in his house. And better after Chatzos. The right thing is not to smoke at all, especially if one doesn't need it. Nowadays, one shouldn't be smoking a whole year. We know how dangerous it is. That's in terms of eating. Washing is forbidden, whether hot water or cold water. Even sticking a finger into water is a problem on Tisha B'Av. If a woman needs to do a hefsek tara on Tisha B'Av, so she should wash only a tiny little bit right in the area over there, wash around the area, and that's about it. In the morning, when we wake up Tisha B'Av morning, we wash our hands only to the edge of the knuckles. And when the hands are dry, even if it's slightly moist, we could put our hands over our eyes. If this person has some stuff in their eyes that they normally wash with water, you could just wash it off with that water that's left over from the Negel Aser. You're allowed to take a cloth and put it in water on Erev Tisha B'Av, or this year on Erev Shabbos. Take it out of the water, let it become so dry that it's not tefech, alanas latfich. It's dry to the extent that if you put it on something else, that thing cannot make something else wet. And you could use that to wipe your face, hands, and feet because you need to have like a wipe. And that's why you're allowed to use these baby wipes so long that they're not wet to the extent that it can make something else wet, which in turn makes something else wet. So if it's semi-dry, mostly dry, you could use these wipes and wipe yourself on Tisha B'Av. Person goes to the mikveh every day is not let it go on Tisha B'Av. If a person touched areas that are covered that you normally wash your hands, so you wash till your knuckles. Person comes out of the bathroom, they should touch one of those covered areas, and then they could wash properly until their knuckles. People who normally wash 3 times and come out of the bathroom can wash again now 3 times, but not their entire hand. But if a person just walked into the bathroom, even if he didn't go there for bathroom purposes, for doing their needs, even if he normally washes his hands always, no, there's no heter to go wash your hands on Tisha B'Av for that, because you have a chumrah every time you walk into the bathroom to wash your hands. Person touches their shoes. Before that, I said if you come out of the bathroom and you have to do whatever you have to do in the bathroom, you should touch the covered areas of your body. If it's before davening, you don't have to touch any covered areas. The very fact that you did whatever you had to do is a reason to go wash your hands. If you touch your shoes, your Tisha B'Av shoes, then wash your hands too. Your hands became dirty, you're allowed to wash the dirty area. Someone who's sick is allowed to wash. Women that are cooking, they need to wash the meat. Even though the hands get washed, they need to wash the dishes and the hands are getting washed. Even though they're using hot water for the dishes, that's fine. You're allowed to bathe little children, not the age of chinuch, you bathe them every day. Ideally, you should put on gloves so you shouldn't get wet when you're washing them. A person who needs to eat bread on Tisha B'Av washes his hands properly, the full hand, and he washes regular mayim achrem that people normally wash. I don't want to go over time, but I'm just going to finish the 5 things that are forbidden on Tisha B'Av, and maybe we'll have another opportunity to go through a few more things to make up, because there's a lot to cover here. Anointing is forbidden on Tisha B'Av. Anointing using oil, other liquids for pleasure, cosmetics. If it's deodorant without a smell, just to take away a smell, unscented is fine. Anointing for medical purposes is fine. A spray for mosquitoes is fine. Cream against the sun, suntan lotion is also fine. These things are not considered tiny, a form of pleasure. Shoes, leather shoes, or covered with leather is a problem on Tisha B'Av. A woman who's within 30 days of birth, someone who's not well, someone who has a problem with his foot, all these people are allowed to wear shoes. Children are not allowed to wear shoes. But again, nowadays, we have other alternatives easily available, so there's no reason to put on leather shoes. There's sneakers, there's all different types of stuff. Married people understand that it's halacha they're not have intimacy on Tisha B'Av, and all halachos apply on Tisha B'Av too. There are many other halachas about Tisha B'Av associated with learning Torah and other things too. We'll stop here. Hopefully, none of this is going to be relevant at all. We're going to have Mitzvah, the coming of Mashiach, taken from Yad Mamish, and the day of Tisha B'Av will be the greatest Yom Tov ever with Sudas Torah's Kol Tov.